here has survival training?
You're a bit early for a committee.
We will construct a red-canopy once power is restored.
Shelter first, water second, fire always. Food.
Loop, tail through, around, back in, holds under strain, even wet.
Pre-technological nonsense.
Predator spectrum signature near, 47 meters, 39, 32.
32 meters.
It's a bluff no predator would dare.
Momentum's yours. Ending's mine.
Thank you. Thank you.
QL's 12 storm feed online. Supercell ETA, 14 minutes. Ground current hazard severe. Recommend.
Down!
Still here. Redundancy is respect for entropy.
30 on, 90 off. Nobody pulls 2 watches back to back. 200 milliliters water every 45 minutes until the heat breaks.
Smooth first. Fast comes later.
Contact first. Wait. Small chew last.
Poison.
Animals step where the land makes sense. Edges, corridors.
Primitive traps.
Analgesic tannins. Remember the sign.
Analgesic tannins.
Your methods are crude. Without power, we are trapped in ignorance. Ignorance kills when you stop moving. Predator signature. Near proximity. Storm wasn't the only thing hunting tonight. It'll come where the ground is soft.
Weapons useless. Fall back. Stay down. Thank you.
Gratitude doesn't replace hygiene.
Supercell ETTA, 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Severe.
Ground current hazard immediate mitigation. Crawl if the blue hunts. Crawl. Don't run. Still here.
"30 on, 90 off. Nobody doubles. Feet checked every shift. Blisters lie, then they kill."
Big heat against cold sky. Orbital eyes will see.
Not primitive. Tactical.
The signs, they look like...
Prayers.
not prayers.
Shortcuts for fear. Who set this field?
Montana winters, Afghan summers. Scouts taught me knots, military taught me numbers.
Lines that respect the land, not fight it.
This proficiency is not generalizable. An outlier phenomenon. Humans are anomalies.
You ever see a human city after snow kills the power? They shovel, grill, check neighbors. Not outlier, operating system.
Recreational?
You'd be amazed what they call a good time. Field Operations Authority, on surfaces. It should be yours. It belongs to whoever knows the ground best that day. Today?
And yet, when the air went blue,
We all crawled.
Blue doesn't care who you are.
Who here has survival training?
Let the human lead.
Advisory. When a human laughs at the survival prompt, delegate.
A red sky like a torn vein bled through the cracked hull, and the jungle answered with a sound that was not wind. The crew of the Cosmic Wanderer argued under drowning alarms, drafting plans that needed power they didn't have, while one human tied a simple knot and changed the odds. What hunts when the storm turns the ground into a live wire? What happens when theory collides with teeth, heat, and hunger? And the quiet one laughs at the question, who here has survival training? Asterisk, they asked, who here has survival training? The human just laughed and sat back down. Asterisk. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and join us for more HFY epics every week. Alright, let's begin the story then. The hull of the Cosmic Wanderer lay in 3 broken crescents around a clearing the ship had made for itself at terminal velocity. Shattered plating steamed in the wet heat. The sky wore a bruise of cloud, purple shot with electric veins. Hazard beacons painted the clearing a nervous red, and the smell under everything was oil, char, and something sweet that did not come from the ship. Captain Thexalon, tall, velvet gray skin webbed with sensory ridges that tightened when he was angry, stood in the open hatch and tried to stare the alarms into silence. He had 6 campaign medals and an engineer's mind, and in calm years he was a pleasant tyrant. Now, lines etched between his compound eyes as the environmental system droned in a voice that had no fear to soften it. Enviro Module Sable 3. Airborne Spore Load, Elevated. Waterborne Pathogens, Unknown. Predator Spectrum Signatures, 3 at range, 1 near. Atmospheric Charge, Rising. Supercell Formation Probability, 0.82. Recommend immediate shelter, ground current mitigation, potable water production. Time horizon, short. Primary and secondary power. Thexalon snapped. Offline, replied navigation. Tertiary is having an existential crisis. Thexalon's officers unfolded holograms with hands that trembled just enough to betray them. Fields of blue light sprang into being above the grass. Kinetic dome concept sketches, modular canopy diagrams, sterilizer chains that, someone finally said it, needed power. Dr. Real, the biochemist with translucent fins for hair, floated in a gel sling and insisted the nanosterilizers would run if they could route more current through the burnt bus. Vruk, science officer, whose species wore their scorn as comfortably as skin, declared that the local flora was biochemically chaotic and must not be touched. Theory blossomed in petals of perfect geometry, none of it reachable in the present tense of hunger, heat, and incoming weather. Thexalon turned from plan to plan as if the next diagram would give him back the ship. Who here has survival training? He barked. Real, not simulations. Credentials launched like flares, wilderness modules, laboratory safety, terrain sims. Titles glittered. The only one who didn't speak was the human. Kai Nakamura sat on a half-crushed cargo case near the tree line, elbows on knees, eyes moving the way a game trail moves through brush, slow, efficient, seeing edges. He had a stink of smoke on him already, as if the fire knew him and had leaned close to say hello. When Thexalon's question reached him, Kai exhaled, and a small laugh slipped out, the kind people make at the start of a long chore. He didn't stand. He didn't salute. He just reached into a tangle of hull webbing and started pulling it into long, even cords. Vruk flared the frill along his jaw. Is that amusement? Kai kept working. Bit early for a committee on a planet that doesn't care about committees. Thexalon's ridges tightened. You find this situation humorous, human? Not the situation, Kai said. The timing. Shelter first. Water second. Fire always. Food later. Storm never negotiates. We have. He glanced at the sky the way a farmer reads winter. Not long. We will construct a kinetic canopy, Vruk said crisply. When power is restored, which it will provide superior protection. Unless it doesn't exist, Kai replied. He stood then, not to challenge, but because motion was his argument. He jogged to the edge of the clearing with 3 strips of webbing, a bent bracket, and a shard of reflective plating, and he began to lash a lean-to lower than Pride would prefer. He set the reflective plate as a heat wall. He positioned the sleeping area on the lee side where the wind died and the smoke drift wouldn't choke them. He sank short stakes at shallow angles because a storm will rip tall ones free, and he laid a shallow trench upslope to catch the first sheet of water before it found their backs. His knots were ugly. They held. "Captain," Dr. Reel said softly, watching Kai's hands. "His design accounts for shear and conductive risk." Vruktal's frill twitched. "It accounts for ignorance." Thexalon said nothing. He was watching the sky, and the sky was answering. Sable 3 cleared its throat again. Predator spectrum signature near has advanced to proximity threshold. 47 meters. 39. 32. The crew went very still. Kai didn't. He swiveled his head to find the wind, barely there, but present, and moved the fresh-cut greenery he'd stacked so the scent cone drifted away from sleeping space. Then he picked 2 crew with able hands, taught them a clove hitch and a bowline, and set them to guyline duty with the kind of voice that assumes obedience by ignoring the possibility of anything else. He jogged downhill to the faint, hesitant murmur of a creek they'd heard through the alarms, and Vruktal trailed him, muttering about biochemistry and liability while recording everything. The creek announced itself by smell first: whetstone and living rot. Kai crouched on a sandbar and laid out a cloth filter drawn from a med sling, a layer of sand scooped from the bar, a layer of charcoal he crushed from the ship's own firebed, and another layer of sand. "Gravity does half," he said. "Heat does the rest." He fashioned a rocket stove from 2 ceramic intakes, mouth to mouth, and fed it a miser's diet of twigs until it drew like a small dragon. He brought the first filtered liter to a rolling boil and set it aside with the tender care one gives to a medicine that hurts to make. Reel drifted closer, eyes wide. "How many milliliters per head, given heat stress?" 200 every 45 minutes until the sun quits biting, Kai said. "Salt after. Not before." "You pull these numbers from superstition?" Vruktal sneered. "Memory," Kai said. "Montana summers. Afghanistan winters. Boy Scouts taught me to tie the knot. The military taught me to count." He spoke without nostalgia. He did not dress the past in flags. He counted, simply, like a man counting heartbeats while waiting for pain to pass. By the second liter the crew started to come in 1s and 2s. Thirst draws even the proud. Kai marked a muddy bark with 3 glyphs from twigs laid in a triangle. Danger, stomach pain, because the sap that oozed there smelled of almonds, and that can mean death. Then he knelt by a low shrub with dark fruit and conducted the old universal edibility test in measured stages. Contact on the wrist, wait. Contact on the lip, wait. Small chew, wait. He spat the first. The second he kept, measured, ready to discard the moment his body wrote a complaint. He watched himself with the same calm suspicion he gave the world. "Your method is pre-technological," Vruktal said, recording without blinking. "It's what you have when you don't have what you want," Kai said. He found a bark that numbed a bitten finger, marked it with a double cross for analgesic tannins, and moved on. He left small triple twig symbols at the periphery of camp, because symbols are faster than explanation when fear is chewing on your heels. He said little, and more got done than anyone expected. At dusk the jungle changed its voice. Daybuzz sank and night hum rose like a choir tuning for a darker hymn. Kai's snares, stripped cable with low drag, whispered along a game corridor where the brush made a V and the ground told stories in small prints. He set a deadfall with a counterweight plate like an old farmhouse door waiting to slam and explained to no one and everyone about edges, scent cones, and why animals step where they step, which is where the land makes sense to them. He did not set bait. He set inevitability. The first shriek was small, a lure bird complaining about evolution. The second was not small. Brush hissed. Something heavy-shouldered thorn and fern aside with the confidence of a creature that had never been told no. Thexalon lifted an arc rifle and swore when it only coughed. Vruktal took a step forward because arrogance counts as courage until the teeth arrive. 3 meters of predator unspooled from the green, sinewed, low, spined with quills like thrown knives, eyes the color of old bronze. It smelled like hot iron and carrion. Kai didn't raise the spear he had made from a hull strut and a sharpened edge. He planted it, but in a shallow hole he'd stomped moments before, braced his back foot, lowered the point, and let physics honor the appointment. Momentum impaled hunger. The spear drove under the jawline, and the creature convulsed, jaws trying to decide if death was edible. Kai stepped in, not away, not back, his body choosing now over later, and sank a second thrust through the thin place under the mandible where God and evolution leave a door to blood. He held the spear with both hands, not shaking, not triumphant, just present. He bled the animal where the ground dipped, and when the life left it, he touched the brow alone and said, "Thank you." Then he hauled the carcass downwind, because gratitude without hygiene is a story with a bad ending. No one spoke. You could hear the storm building by the shape of silence under the thunder. Sable, 3 spoke first because systems always speak first. Echo, 12 storm feed online. Supercell ETA 14 minutes. Ground current hazard, severe. Recommend, lower metallic profiles. Establish lightning ground. Trench shelter. Protect flame. Crawl if arcs initiate. Thexalon turned toward his kinetic canopy diagram, as if the idea could hold rain. Kai's voice cut across the clearing like a line under a paragraph. Drop everything that shines. Lower the plates. Stack wet stone for the wind. Tie your lines low. You. 2 of you. Braid me cable to ground a mast there, and there. Fire lives under a pot with a chimney. I don't want a single lick of flame free when the air goes live. Crawl if the blue starts to dance. Crawl, don't run. On what authority? Vruktal snapped. Kai's face in the stormlight looked carved by older weather. Authority of not dying. It is a strange thing to watch command leak without a mutiny. Thexalon did not surrender a title. He surrendered the present tense. Orders stopped being questions. Hands obeyed the shape of sense in motion. The crew lowered metal profiles until the camp looked humble to the sky. A shallow trench became a moat for a half-height lean-to. The braided cable kissed a grounded spike driven into hardpan. The fire shrank under a pot and breathed through a chimney of broken pipe, like a patient who knows the storm will pass if it can only keep breathing. The storm arrived like an argument that had read every manual on how to win. Rain hit so hard it seemed to come from the ground up. Thunder stood on the clearing and refused to leave. The air brightened with a child's blue that had no warmth in it. The first runners, thin, curious, skipped along the wet clearing, little fingers of light tasting pathways. Someone yelped when a blue streamer reached for their boot. Kai's voice did not lift in volume. It deepened. Down. They went prone, a squad of scholars and spacers clinging to humble ground. An arc, fat as a wrist, hunted across the camp, sniffed the chimney, then fell into the braided cable like a decision. The glow ran to earth, hissed, and the smell of ozone made everyone taste metal. Thexalon's ridges had flattened, the way a body flattens in the face of God. Vruktal's frill had collapsed to his jaw, and his eyes were huge and very young. The storm did not care about credentials. It solved for height and conductivity. Minutes stretched the way rope stretches when it is all that holds. 10, 12, 14. Then the thunder began to walk away, talking to itself. The rain softened from punishment to penance. The glow in the air faded from weapon to ghost. When the crew finally rose, their joints sounded like old gates. The fire, protected, was still alive, a coal bed under a black pot. Kai uncovered it the way one uncovers a sleeping child. Signals, he said, as if the storm had been a meeting they'd scheduled and kept. He scouted the clearing for mirrors, and when only one reflective plate had survived, he built 3 identically angled ground mirrors anyway from polished scrap and wet leaves over clay to smooth them. 3 triangles, each 3 meters to a side, because redundancy is respect for entropy. He set smoke dye puffs at intervals you could measure with a pulse. 1, 1, 2. Repeat, the old distress code simple enough to survive panic. He strung reflective cordage at the tree lean in a shape visible to a cautious drone operator. He sent 2 to the ridge with oiled cloth and a stick to make a heat bloom for any orbital IR sweep. A warm flower in a cold field. Watches? Thexalon asked, voice hoarse. 30 on, 90 off, Kai said. Clockwise rotation. Nobody gets 2 shifts back to back. Feet, check them. Blisters lie, and then they kill. Water, 200 milliliters per head per 45 minutes until the heat breaks. Salt, after. Pit, downwind. Tools, log them. We have 31 usable edges, 5 bindings, 2 spearheads, 1 fire pot. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. He said the last like a prayer learned at a time when speed was a luxury and smooth was survival. Thexalon nodded like a student and nobody laughed. A hierarchy had shifted its weight without falling. Days became a ledger of small mercies. Thexalon, who had been decorated for black sky maneuvers, learned to lance a blister with a sterilized sliver and praised the crewman for telling the truth about pain. Dr. Reel, whose instruments were dead, learned to taste a grain of ground bark and call it medicine because the numb it brought allowed sleep. Vruktal learned that arrogance is expensive to feed and humility costs less. He learned it slowly, and his resistance did not leave him. But each time a routine saved a life, he had to move his denial a little further back behind his teeth. At dawn on the 4th day, the sky cleared to a pale arc that made everyone feel suddenly mortal. The clearing looked like a sketch of civilization. Lines tidy, waste pit marked with a shame that kept disease away, fire at a respectful size, meat drying on a rack with smoke touching it like a scribbled blessing. The perimeter glyphs, those simple, stupid twig signs, looked like a child's game until a responder corvette came out of the high glare and paused, cautious, reading the field the way a veteran reads a scar. They did not land hard. They landed like guests at a house that had rules. A scout with old eyes and a younger limp walked first through the steam and the smell of smoked meat and paused at the ground mirrors. He looked at the chimney cover on the fire. He looked at the gorget of braided cable driven into the earth and the way the lean-to staked low and sideways to the wind. He looked at the glyphs, triangle for danger, double for ease, and his mouth made a private shape. Who set this field? He asked soft. Thexalon opened his mouth, closed it, and turned to Kai because the answer was in the turn. The neutral system spoke into the pause because they always do. A quiet ping from the network made everyone's wrists hum. Vesta, 9 risk index node, update complete. Planetary classification adjustments. Earth, previous, peaceful habitable world. New, class, 5 death world recreational. Note, human population demonstrates leisure activity overlap with survival profiles. Advisory, treat human fieldcraft as force multiplier. Thexalon blinked. Recreational. The scout with the limp snorted a laugh. You'd be amazed what they call a good time. The debriefs took hours and felt like years. Investigators asked questions the way rain asks a slope which way the hill goes. Kai answered with a map made of small words. He did not boast. He did not pretend it was magic. He named winters in Montana that bit like wolves and summers that cooked the shade from your breath. He named the scouts where he learned to make water listen to cloth and sand. He named a military course that taught him to count heartbeats and ration fear. He did not say the war by name. He took the pen when they gave it to him and drew the camp on paper with lines that looked like respect for the land, then set the pen down and rubbed his thumb where a scar crossed the pad. That was the only time his hand shook. A flicker, enough to warn him he was still human. Vruktal's last defense cracked where his species stored pride. This proficiency is not generalizable, he insisted, weak. It is an outlier phenomenon. The scout's old eyes went kinder. You ever seen a human city after snow takes the power? Watch the neighborhoods. Grills appear. Streets get shoveled. People knock doors just to check. That's not outlier. That's operating system. Thexalon sat with the sigh of a hull settling at dock. The sensory ridges along his skull flattened, not in fear this time, but in acceptance of a new map. We underestimated, he said. No, Kai said. You missorted. Life-threatening environments are recreation where I'm from. We build weekends around them. Thexalon studied him the way a navigator studies a new star. Fieldo. Operations authority, he said at last, as if trying the shape of a new tool. On surfaces, it should be yours. Kai shook his head once. It belongs to whoever knows the ground best on the day. Today, sure. Tomorrow, maybe real if it's water. Maybe you if it's structure. I'm not a flag. And yet, Thexalon said softly, when the air went blue, we all crawled. Kai's mouth slanted, not quite a smile, something rueful in it. Blue doesn't care who you are. They lifted off with a discipline that felt borrowed from the camp. Their edges counted, their routines checked, their fire watched by a heart that refused to go out. The cosmic wanderer would fly again after the mechanics untangled its burnt nerves, and the reports would circulate with graphs, indices, maps that made mountains look tame. But in the quiet places where truth goes when charts lie, the story would be simpler. A knot that held because a hand had tied it 1,000 times. A pot that kept the coal alive. A spear that met momentum halfway. A voice that said crawl and made pride obey because the air had begun to glow. Months later, on a different world with a different smell, Thexalon would ask a question out of long habit. Who here has survival training? The room would fill with answers, glittering with titles. Somewhere a human would laugh, small, the sound a man makes when he sees a fence that needs mending, and sit back down. Thexalon would feel his hand lift, palm up, offering authority like a tool. Let the human lead, he would say, and the neutral systems, which remember better than pride, would whisper across the net with a kind of mercy that sounds like math. Advisory: when a human laughs at the survival prompt, delegate. The galaxy kept its storms. It kept its predators, its spores, its broken power trees, and its committees that bloomed too late. But wherever a ground mirror caught the sun in a triangle, and a fire lived under a covered pot, and glyphs of 3 little twigs marked danger simple enough for a frightened mind to read, the safest plan was the one that began like this. The human chuckled. They were wrong.